G'day and welcome to Blake's Builds. In this episode I'm going to take you through the build of this billy cart that I made with my kids over the summer. It's made for all sizes. I've made adjustable holes in the main beam so that I can extend out the front wheelbase as they get older and bigger, and I can even ride it as well. The billy cart was made from an old pram, three-wheeler sports jogging pram. Most of the parts for it were purchased from Bunnings that I didn't already have lying around, or I was able to salvage from the original pram. The front steering here has some stop limiters that prevent the front steering from turning too far to the right or left. That just keeps the kids out of trouble and prevents the front wheels from getting sucked in under the main beam. It's got a bit of brake here that's harvested off an old bike, and that's just connected up to one of the wheels because I had lots of issues trying to get that working for both wheels. So still does the job for them and manages to lock up one of the rear wheels, which brings them to a stop pretty quickly. Harvested from the original pram is the entire seat here, under which I've got some padding and some straps here which are left attached for the purpose of strapping in, and they work quite well. Also from the original pram I managed to hang on to the rear push bar, which still has its adjustable swing action here, and that's great because it means that you can easily push the kids around on it, and the kids who are shorter than me can also have this further down to allow them to push in more easily as well. So underneath the pram you can see how I've done the wheelbase. The front here I managed to actually retain the original suspension from the front of the pram, and the same with the rear. It's got these nice coilover springs here, which provide a lot of good cushioning.
I tried to get my kids involved in helping me build the billy cart as much as I could. To start with, I stripped the pram of all the bits and pieces, including the seat and other padding. This pram came with dual rear drum brakes, which I had to disassemble to be able to pull apart the pram and then trying to reuse those later on. Next came a whole bunch of angle grinding to cut up the pram into different pieces that I could reuse. I didn't really measure anything up or plan anything ahead before cutting. I just went as I saw fit, and it turned out pretty good in the end. I didn't plan it out, but it turned out that the diameter of the tubing on the pram was exactly 20mm, which matched perfectly with a 20mm hole saw. This allowed me to use different pieces of wood to attach different parts of the pram together.
What I've done so far here is cut the pram to bits, and basically what I'm trying to do here is continue to use the suspension, which means I have to attach the billy cart from above the suspension, and it goes forward from there. So underneath this, the intention is to basically attach two supports going down to the underside of the rear seat section, which is going to then be a main beam from there forward to the front wheels. So I'll do two large pieces like this, there, and then probably a smaller one in the middle, just to support the back of the seat and a little bit of extra support. And underneath those, I'll do one across, and then from that forwards, so it's not too high, otherwise it could tip over. But also giving enough clearance so that the suspension can continue to compress down. It doesn't need too much clearance, thankfully. That's the bottom of the stroke there. As long as the very base doesn't go below the bottom of the shock here, and it's inside these red things, then it should be fine.
Once the supports were done, I then attached some MDF to make the seat back, and I added a couple of additional supports out from the main beam at the front of the seat. Then it was time to add the side supports and armrests onto the side of the seat. Getting the angles right for the armrests was a little tricky, so I had to measure everything up and make sure I marked it out correctly as well. It was about this stage the kids started wanting test rides, which was also a good way to determine the positioning of a lot of parts of the billy cart. To avoid any sharp edges or splinters from the wood, it was pretty key to make sure everything was sanded down correctly. Once the main seat shape was done, I could put some padding into it and for this I used some non-slip mat that's normally used on tabletops. I secured it using some large-headed Phillips head screws. Then I stretched the pram seat over the edges and secured it using the same screws. Because the pram's seatbelt was attached to the seat, I was able to reuse that also. Next I started on the front wheel assembly, and for this I bought some threaded rod. However, the threaded rod on its own wasn't strong enough to hold up the whole front axle, so I had to attach it to some wood as well. I used 4 L brackets to hold the axle in place, plus the original front wheel assembly. I rounded the corners of all the L brackets off with an angle grinder to prevent any injuries. To hold the axle in place firmly after it was inserted, I used a bunch of different nuts and locking nuts to hold it in place between each of the brackets. The wheels were held on in the same way, with nuts on the inside to space them out from the bracket and double nuts on the outside to hold them in place. Once I was happy with the positioning, I drilled a hole to mount the front wheel assembly into. I also drilled additional holes further back for while the kids are shorter, so they can still sit and use the billy cart. After attaching a rope to the front steering and a few other ropes for stop limiters, it was time to do the painting, and a base coat of black was used. The kids then picked the final colour of a lime green. Getting the brakes to work was by far the hardest and most time-consuming part of this project. I started by trying to use the pram's dual drum brakes with an old brake lever from a bike. However, this and all other attempts to use the Y-split brake system proved too hard for the kids to pull. So I then switched to the old method of using a lever to push on the rear wheels. However, that also didn't work out for various reasons. What I ultimately ended up doing was going back to the brake lever from the bike. However, I didn't hook it up through the Y-split system, but instead just connected it to one of the rear wheels, and this proved easy enough for the kids to pull and still brought the billy cart to a stop in a reasonable time. So there you have it. That's my take on how to make a billy cart for your kids.
You're going to push me over?
One of my favourite things about this billy cart is I can still fit on it. One of the only issues with it at this point is it is a little heavy for the kids to push around, but that should become less of an issue as they get older. One of the final touches was to strap some pool noodle to key areas on the billy cart just to help soften any blows. I also tied a small little loop of rope to the very front of the billy cart just to make it easier to pick up and carry and drag around. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave any comments in the comments section below. I'm open to any kind of feedback, and I hope to keep making videos like this in the future, so please do let me know what you think.